To whom much is given, much is required. Part of that requirement is sharing. Culture is the heartbeat within our lives, and it's at the core of so many things. While we live in a time when we are starving for wisdom, I welcome you to your wisdom retreat at Culture Raises Us.
Wendell Hastings, today's guest, a multifaceted leader in the diversity and inclusion and marketing space, 20 plus years of experience in the sports, entertainment, corporate social responsibility, and philanthropy spaces. Also played a very, very key role in shaping the nightlife culture in New York City in the early 90s, when this was a very, very defining, what I call, moment of shaping culture. I've had the pleasure of knowing him for 25 plus years. Super excited to share this story. But before we do so, I would love to get your thoughts on when you hear culture, what does that mean to you?
First of all, it's the late 90s, not the early 90s.
We're taking all the 90s. We're taking all the 90s.
I was just immersed in the late 90s, man.
I love it.
And listen, man, when I think of culture, I think of, like-minded people with a similar mission and purpose, And, culture is always been very important to me. And, you're parts of many cultures when you're a part of a culture or cultures, right? So you have ethnicity, you have, community, you have industry, all those different cultures, right? But it's typically, for me, when I think of culture, it's, like-minded people with similar interests, common goals, and moving towards a same purpose is a culture.
It's so fitting that you said different components and like-minded individuals, because I look at, given your positioning across all these facets of Black culture that kind of spans across music, fashion, sport. I would love to get your thoughts on if there was like this particular moment when you realized just how big and instrumental this culture was to shaping and influencing the global landscape as we know it today.
Yeah, I mean, I can say, coming up and, coming out of college, going to Hampton, and then coming to back to New York, coming back home, and my sister working in the music business, right? My sister was 3 years older than me. She worked for Jive Records, and she was working with all of these groups at the time that no one had ever heard of, A Tribe Called Quest and Boogie Down Production. She was giving me all this music, and she worked for Jive, and my sister was the one who really introduced me to the culture of Black music that exists. I had no idea that even some of those jobs existed, right?
Wow.
A&R and styling and
right,
and she was doing, this amazing work and traveling and seemed to be having fun and, loving the work that she worked on. And then Will Smith, Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, doing all those people were groups that she worked with at that time. And I had never heard of these groups or knew anything about them. And certainly we were already influenced by early hip hop, right? But when I really saw that she had a job doing this,
that part, a 9 to 5 getting paid.
Yeah, like she had a job doing this. So my first job when I came home from college was working for the United Way of New York City. That my dad helped me get a job from one of his friends. They both went to Syracuse together, worked in civil rights. My dad worked for the National Urban League, and he worked for Vernon Jordan, and, John Jacob and Whitney Young. So I was really influenced by, the civil rights movement and the work that they did in the civil rights space. But he had no idea of anything about the music business in my family, But he did help my sister get a job as well. And one of her first jobs was at working at RCA. And that's how she got introduced to Jive. And she got, but her being a few years younger than me, I had no idea what she was doing or what she was up to, employment wise. When I came home and I started visiting her job, I'd leave my job at the United Way of New York City, where I'm stomping the pavement, raising money, asking people to contribute to the United Way campaigns and doing that kind of stuff. Then I'm going to her job and I'm like, this is really cool what she's doing, She was working with Kumo D, and like I said, and all of the artists on Jive at that time. And I'm saying, wow, this is a real business. Like, this is a real industry. She's being employed, and these people are making music that's being heard all over the world.
The world.
So that was probably really my first experience saying to myself, wow, this is an entire industry and a business that I really know nothing about. It has huge implications on the world. And not only that, Aster, as you can probably attest, I started getting introduced to the music business and seeing all of these young people that were executives.
That part.
I'm like, these people were my peers, people that were my age, my sister's age, and they're, in their 20s. And, they had these cool jobs. And I just started getting introduced to the music industry. That's where I actually met Puffy, and he and I became friends. He was a couple of years younger than me, he worked at Uptown at the time. And I'm like, these jobs these people have are really cool. So I was like, how can I be a part of this? But I didn't really have any experience. Like, I'd never interned at a music company. Here I am working on the, on the nonprofit side. And at that time, there could have been a turning point for me to continue working in nonprofit, because
right,
I went to the president of United Way of New York City, and I said, look, I would like to start fundraising from the music business.
Wow. Interesting.
Because, when I worked at the United Way, we were responsible for doing giving campaigns in every industry.
Wow.
So you would go and say, you want to do a payroll deduction and give, $2 out of your paycheck every month to help the health and human services industry of New York. So you had people who worked in finance, you had people who worked in the nonprofit sector, the commercial sector, advertising.
Okay.
Go to all of those companies and run the campaigns to raise money for the United Way. And at that time, I knew Andre Arel, I knew Russell, I knew all those guys, but those corporate guys, they didn't even know who these guys were.
These weren't
big names. So I went to my president. I went to my boss and said, look, I'd like to set up a meeting with Andre Arel. Now, Andre and those guys at the time knew me as Cool Win, the United Way.
That's right. So
I was like, Dre, can I bring my, set up a meeting and have my guy come over and talk to you about what the United Way does and so on and so forth? And Dre was like, yeah, set up a meeting. Our president kind of blew the meeting off.
What? Right. Not knowing who he was dealing with.
Yeah. Blew the meeting off at the time, set somebody else, some other lower level executive who probably had no business going to this meeting with me at all. And nothing ever really became of it. But it could have been, the impetus and the segue to have a relationship within the music business in United Way of New York City. And it wasn't until many, many years later
that they finally caught on.
They caught on.
Go figure.
And it was a huge missed opportunity, not only on their part, but probably for even the trajectory of my career. Because I may have stayed
had that been a thing that you were able to build on, in which could have been a significant piece of business opportunity for that company, 1,000%.
For United Way of New York City. And it would have been the beginning of a relationship and huge gains and profits and support for the United Way of New York City in the music business. But it was an untapped industry, and they really never tapped into it. But here I was, probably 23 years old at the time, saying I want to set up this meeting with Andre, and then next it would have been Russell. But the executives in my company did not know.
Didn't get it. Typical leadership, or interesting leadership, that don't embrace the expertise of the team who have insight into things that they don't. Right? It's a wild concept, and it's funny that you even mentioned that in terms of the general influence that the culture could have had even earlier on the business model that you were working in. But the other thing that you mentioned, which I just learned about, I didn't know about your legacy of activism, and advocacy coming from your father's work, like you said, within the civil rights space at the National Urban League. And I think it's evident that that played a significant role in your why, I would assume. But I wonder what was the most kind of memorable memory you have of your father doing this work at a young age.
Oh, wow. You know, that's a great question. My dad is the biggest influence on my life
Then,
than anyone. And when you talk about heroes, I don't use that term very loosely. And idols and things of that nature. There are people that I've admired in my lifetime.
right.
Dad is my hero and my idol.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I was born in Washington, D.C. My dad worked for the Washington Urban League at that time, but he was a lifetime urban leaguer.
Mm.
So, he had lived in several different cities going up the ranks as an urban league executive. So he had lived in Milwaukee, lived in Ohio. My mother was from Virginia. So he moved from various cities. So it just so happened, my sister was born in Virginia and they lived in Ohio. Then when he settled in Washington, D.C., I was born. And about 4 or 5 years after I was born, he was called for an opportunity as a senior executive at the National Urban League, which was in New York City.
The big leagues. The big league.
So, he looked around for places to live, Westchester, Queens, the Jersey side, the whole lot. So he ended up settling on the Jersey side, but he worked in Manhattan every day. So we moved to Paterson, New Jersey, settled in Paterson, New Jersey, where I grew up pretty much all of my life. Because we never moved we never moved in my childhood until he was time to retire.
Gotcha.
So all of those people were huge influences in my life. I mean, Vernon Jordan probably had a huge impact on my life because my dad worked for Mr. Jordan when he was the president of the National Urban League for many, many years.
Mm.
So, I would go to the National Urban League and meet all of these, civil rights leaders, and I'd go to Mr. Jordan's office and play under his desk and with his pens and, you know what I mean? And just do things that kids do when they go to, their father's job,
Right.
But certainly all of those people had a huge impact on my life and just seeing how they moved and operated. I would go to the National Urban League conference every year as a kid because, and that's honestly how I got to see all of these different cities as a young person because we didn't really go on family vacations. So my dad would make those conferences.
The vacation. That's right. The paid for vacation.
So that's how I saw California and Los Angeles. That's how I saw, Chicago. That's how I got to go see all of these different cities when my dad was an urban leaguer. And then when I became of a certain age, about 14, he made sure that I had a job at the conference every year. Right.
So dope.
He knew guys that were, look, I would see how my dad engaged with a lot of his friends and who were people that he also worked with that supported the Urban League. He had a guy named Marty Turby. He worked for Tanqueray, right? So he was the liquor guy. My dad's guy who was like, and when I equate my life to his, he's like, that was probably my dad's Keenan Towns at the time.
Right. Hi, Keenan Towns. Yes, you do.
Right. So then he had another guy who worked for Sunshine Biscuits. They made Chipperoos and all these different companies. Then he had a guy work for Chock full of Nuts, right? All these. So my dad would always talk to his friends about getting my sister, myself, and our friends jobs. Right?
Look, John.
Urban League Conference. The Urban League Conference was only a week. So, you have all of these different companies that have vendors and give away samples and do things of that nature. So every year, at least for a week, I had a nice little gig, a well-paying job working for Sunshine Biscuits on the convention center floor. All right?
I love that.
So, every year, I'd have my little tie on, my badge, and people would look for me year after year and became familiar with me because my dad's friend's name was Sam Simmons. I remember all of these people. They're no longer living. But,
right.
I was their young employee, their young superstar for the week. To work their booth and their, and be their, their vendor guy. So, seeing how my dad, just managed all of those relationships and friendships. And some people that he worked with were also our personal friends and family friends. And the way they networked amongst each other to make sure that their kids and people that they had relationships got jobs and opportunities, and, to be able to, have internships or even full-time jobs for people that they knew. I saw those kind of things firsthand and knew how important it was.
Early.
At the National League, my dad always fought for equal jobs, equal employment, equal housing, and equal opportunity. That's what the Urban League was all about. So those are the kind of things that were ingrained in me and my values, because they were things that
you saw and benefited from early. And it's crazy because now, as I'm hearing this story, now it gives even more context to your personality and everything that I've known of you over the years. Now it's really all clicking of where the foundation of that came from, right? And I'm so glad you shared the story about what your father did for you early in terms of plugging you into these opportunities, because that's very similar to what we hear of other cultures and communities, right? That we probably did not do the best then for a number of reasons that we can go down a road on. But I'm so glad that you're sharing that story, because it adds so much more depth to who you are. And as I look at, you and many of us, have been in these corporate cultures and in jobs that were kind of intended to do the work within this multicultural diversity and inclusion spaces. And then we find out they were actually exposed to significant barriers, false commitments of support, unwarranted performance scrutiny. I mean, I can go on for days, right? You had a pretty memorable stint at the PGA and had quite the journey. Talk about some of that, especially within a sport culture that has very much been dominated over the years by one race, but has seen the influence of another that's taken it to new heights that it never would have gotten to without that of the underrepresented commitment and validation.
Oh, listen, man, coming from where I come from in terms of everything that you said, my dad, the values that I've had in me that are instilled in me that you would probably call diversity and inclusion now are just baked in me forever I show up, right? So
part of your DNA, bro.
I have to think about how to move in that.
That's right. This is who you are.
This is who I am. This is what you're gonna get when I show up. Certainly in the golf space, when I started in golf in New York, a lot of my peers and my friends weren't playing, but I wanted them to. And I was already a promoter and doing things, Tavern on the Green and parties and things like that. But I said to myself, I fell in love with the game of golf, and I immersed myself in everything that I could read about golf and the history and the culture, and didn't see anything about Black people. So knowing, you have to think about who my influences were at that time. Puffy starting Bad Boy, and Russell starting,
Def Jam, Fat Farm.
Well, I was surrounded by young Black entrepreneurs that had vision to do things and to create things that changed the culture, right? And they did it very authentically as their authentic selves, and showed up as they were with their people, and they created the culture. So, I saw there being a huge void in golf, and we know how Black culture changes things, right? We know how it moves the needle when we show up and participate and get fully engaged and bring our authentic selves to the things that we do. It's always a game changer.
Always.
Right. And I don't just mean a game changer. I mean an economic game changer,
all the things.
All those things.
All the things.
So me saying to myself, like, I'm going through this golf experience as myself as a new golfer, and I'm saying to myself, this game is like really cool. Like, what I'm saying? I got introduced to some guys because of the things that I was doing. As you know, I decided to start a tournament of my own that celebrated Black culture. So, I read in my readings that, a Black man had invented the golf tee. Several years later, a white guy did another version of the golf tee, largely got the credit for it. But what I said is like a black man holds the first patent for the golf tee. So I said the original tee was invented by a black man.
That's right. Message.
So, right. So I said, I'm going to name my company, my brand, Original Tee. The history of black people in golf to let you know that in the late 1800s, there was obviously a black man who was out there playing golf who took it upon himself to get a patent. So this is historic fact. So I said to myself, we always create things and oftentimes don't get the credit. Somebody else may come along or, right? You know how those things go.
Absolutely.
So I said, I want to create this event to make sure that this man is properly credited for his invention. I want to bring Black culture and celebrate Black culture at this event and make sure that we are never denied the credit that we deserve for the things that we do in this game. Right. So that's how Original Tee was born. That's where the influences came from. And so I said, you know, I'm just going to create it and invite the people that I know to support this and people that understand the culture that exists. And that doesn't mean exclusively Black either. That means people who are part of our culture who support this, understand it, and appreciate it. So, you know, when I started that tournament many years ago, the NBA was my first sponsor because of my great relationship with Danny Meiselas, who's one of my best friends. And, you know, he went to David Stern at the time and asked if they could be sponsors. And the NBA has been my longest running sponsor since day one for all of the 24 years that I've been doing the tournament. And then, and then others came along the way, and you know, and it really became my you know, my cornerstone event, and it set me off on a path that totally immersed me in the golf space, allowed me to do some amazing things, meet amazing people. But you know, I met people from so many different walks of life through this golf journey that have helped me along the way, supported Original Tee up until this, you know, to this very day. So, you know,
and it
also led me eventually to the opportunity at the PGA of America for the things that I was doing there.
Yeah, and it also positioned you in a very significant leadership role in terms of shifting a culture from the inside out. And leadership is something that obviously I feel you embody across the board. And you speak about the importance of that often. You also talk about how creativity is kind of needed for effective leadership. How do you creatively, though, look to ways for true change and reclaiming, to be honest, of our cultural impact and our IP or our equity as the leading underrepresented authenticators of all things?
I mean, you know, that's part of the challenge, right? To get people to join you on the journey, right? You want to find, like I said, like-minded people who will support you along the way. And leadership is very interesting because the goal isn't to create more followers. The goal is to create more leaders.
That part. Oof.
Right. So everyone nowadays is obsessed with their followers. If you see some of the people that I've had an influence on, they've become more leaders.
The leaders.
So I might not have 1 million followers, but I might have 12 great leaders out there.
That hard.
You know, the goal was never to get out here and try to have followers. It's like, I want you to be a part of the mission. I want you to take this information, process it, and do great things with the information that I'm going to share with you, that you might be able to have a huge impact on others, right? So the Original Tee event has been exactly that. So if you look at some of the things that it's accomplished and the people that have come through, even the Original Tee tournament, it was always welcoming people to help them have a platform where they could meet influential people, meet people from Black Wall Street executives, where they could meet people in the entertainment business that they would never otherwise interface with, right? So, you know, whether that be Wyatt Worthington, who is a, you know, aspiring PGA professional, and he gets to meet, you know, David Jones or Anthony Spikes. Those guys are members at Baltrasol, right? he's about to play at the PGA Championship. He's never been to Baltusrol in his life. They give him the invitation to go and practice there. And he becomes one of the first Black PGA professionals to play in the PGA Championship, which is a major championship. So being able to bring those people into the environment that is my network helps them to be able to move around in the world. Earl Cooper, right? He was a PGA professional.
I got Earl.
Earl was a PGA pro. I worked for the PGA Pro. Earl was one of the first people to knock on my door to say, hey, I write these children's books and I'm a PGA pro. I want to teach kids. So far, I said, come to the original T event. I'm going to let you run the whole youth component. You can introduce the young people to your books that you've written about Black college and golf and so forth. And he was the youth instructor at Original T for many years.
But let's stop right there. Let's stop right there because that's a great example of your mentality and your DNA of, once again, not about building followers, but building leaders, right? That's a perfect example of someone that you poured into. You gave them the gift of your time, your expertise, and your resources and access. And now Earl is one of the co-founders of, Eastside Golf, which is a huge disruptor, another disruptor within golf culture, right? And when you made that statement about, I'm not about getting a bunch of followers, I'm about building and pouring into leaders, it hit me so hard because, when I had my stint at Nike for over 14 years, the culture was so different in the beginning than when it got to the end of my tenure, meaning the beginning, it was about leaders building leaders, right? Pouring into other individuals to help their development, to thrive, to grow, to be leaders. It changed over the years to leaders building followers out of fear, right? Everybody wanted to maintain their level or continue up the food chain, right? So it was by any means necessary. So that was a significant cultural shift. But the way that you just kind of put it into play of how you operate in terms of, I'm not looking for a bunch of followers. I'm literally looking to build leaders is so reflective of the importance of the type of culture and environment that you create with that type of mentality. And I look at all that you've done in the space of inclusion and being this change agent, which that's a very change agent-like mentality. And I realize that this literally goes all the way back to your early days of curating and promoting parties back in the day, like the Bone and Wen Tavern on the Green parties, which for those that don't know, it's a venue in Central Park that growing up as a youth, it wasn't necessarily a place where we could afford to go or felt even welcome to go. But you having those events in that space was so epic because the history and the look that you brought into that space. And I would always remember as a youth looking in there and not seeing us, but then being able to enjoy a level of experience while others were now looking at us through those glass windows. Did you ever grasp the magnitude of what y'all were doing then?
Listen, man, Astor, I really didn't understand the magnitude of it until much later in my life. But I knew what I was doing then at the time, right? Because you also have to, and then, even in the golf space, those kinds of things kind of transferred over to the golf space, right?
Yep.
My people in the culture to places where they have never seen themselves. And, Tavern on the Green at that time was an exclusive venue. Like no one was able to do, parties.
Anything.
A lot of money to rent out Tavern on the Green, right? So, that was during the Puffy era with Daddy's House and the Red Zone and all those things, right? And those guys were doing some amazing parties for hip hop culture with Red Alert DJing and Kid Capri and all these things. So I'm like, wow, how can we, kind of set ourselves apart and take people to an experience next level that they've not experienced before? And I would always go and seek out all of these different venues in New York City and just go talk to the management to see, what would fly, and I went and talked to the folks at Tavern on the Green, told them we're working in the music industry and want to bring, music executives and people here to have a good time. And we got in the doors of Tavern on the Green and were able to do, have an amazing run and do things like Bone and Wendell where people come and wear your tennis and your country club gear. At that time, I didn't play golf or anything at that time.
Exactly.
But it was just the lifestyle and the culture of it, being able to go to Tavern on the Green and wear your terry cloth sweats and your velour stuff and it was cool, man. And it was fly. And it was just like us expressing ourselves and knowing that we were in this special place in Manhattan that you really don't really have the opportunity to ever go to because you're never invited. Right? You're never invited to go there. But we were able to land that and show up and go and be our authentic selves and have a great time there and bring people another wonderful experience. So, it's the same mentality that I kind of took to golf, going to a golf course. And I would tell people, like, as we get older and mature, we're going to be playing golf. We're going to be going to country clubs. We're going to be doing those things. So let me get onto that early. And
that's right.
There was a point where I transitioned to say, I'm not going to be doing parties in the city anymore. And, I'm going to retire from the party thing. And I want to do something that's going to have longevity, a life of its own that may even be able to outlive me. And that's what I was discovering about golf. It's like these golf tournaments like go on forever. Like it's about their history and their culture. And, it's like you're still talking about, Bobby Jones and Gene Saracen and all these people like 100 years later. It's like we need something like that for Black culture that we can talk about that has longevity, that talks about our history, that educates the people on the contributions that we've made that can outlive me. Right? So that's why I created Original T and the Original T Golf Classic. And now it's, I'm going into my 25-year anniversary next year. And
so dope.
Hopefully this will be something that I can pass on to my son.
That's right.
The next generation of people, and it will outlive me, and it will continue to grow and blossom and be something that is a vehicle to be able to continue to help others, just as it happens in professional golf, right? The Masters, the U.S. Open, the British Open, all these tournaments, all those tournaments are they're great traditions.
That's right. Traditions. You're great tradition.
So I said, I want to create a great tradition in golf for Black culture. And you know what, Aster? It takes a lot of time to create a great tradition.
Yeah.
Just do once or twice and say, I've created a great tradition. So now we are going into 25 years, and I'm so proud of what it has established, what it has become, how it's regarded in the culture. And and you gotta show up the 25-year anniversary. You gotta be
absolutely. Because I've been there. Obviously, I've experienced. I haven't been able to make recent ones just skip. But to hear you say 25 years and the tradition piece, it sits even harder on my spirit to make it a priority. Not that wasn't the case before, but you're absolutely right. I look at in the realm of marketing and diversity and inclusion. You mentioned the value of education in data analytics and key instinct as building blocks to leadership excellence. Can you provide like an example of these three elements and how they all kind of came together to shape a successful diversity and inclusion initiative for a client or somewhere that you work?
I mean, you always have to look at the data so you can understand the landscape of the things that you're dealing with in real terms, right? You have great ideas and great intentions but you always have to combine that with data, right? So you understand what your challenges are, what you're up against, and everything in business, kind of, as you know, even with opportunities, is about solving a problem. What problem does this solve? Because you can do things that are meaningful and have initiatives and things of that nature that are awesome and that are meaningful and so forth, but they might not be seen as solving a problem. I'm going to digress for a minute, but I'm going to get back to it. So take, for instance, the Charlie Sifford initiative, right? When I first started working at the PGA of America, I wanted to address kind of the root of the problem and go back to as far as we possibly could with people that were living, that were Black, that had been overlooked by the golf industry. Charlie Sifford, Lee Elder, those folks were, Renee Powell, the Powell family. Those were people that were probably the oldest, some of the oldest living significant people in golf that had never been recognized. In baseball, you have Jackie Robinson. Charlie Sifford was was a lot of times referred to as the Jackie Robinson of golf.
Of golf.
That's just who is Charlie Sifford? Oh, he's the Jackie Robinson of golf. He broke the color barrier, and I said, oh wow. It's interesting how baseball treats Jackie Robinson, but golf doesn't treat Charlie Sifford in the same regard. Jackie's numbers retired. People, they have Jackie Robinson Day. That whole, his wife is still, regarded as, a significant figure in all of baseball. Charlie Sifford, not so much, But then there didn't, a whole lot of other Black players didn't come into golf as a result of Charlie Sifford playing. There were some that did, but not like baseball. Golf still held on to their, that culture of exclusion, and they had a stronghold on it. But I say this to say, the opportunity was right to get Charlie Sifford the Presidential Medal of Freedom at the time because Obama was in office and he was a golfer.
That's right.
I said, wow, this would be a great opportunity to try to get him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Although that was a great initiative and I accomplished it, the people at the PGA of America, the leadership didn't even come to D.C. to acknowledge him receiving the award and to congratulate him at the time.
Are you serious?
Yeah. So I say that to say, for them, it wasn't really solving any kind of
That's right.
Initiative, but it doesn't solve any problem. But for me, I was trying to change the culture of a whole organization and saying, this is the time. Now is the time for me. So this wasn't as a result of any real data or or analytics or things of that nature. So, and this too, sometimes with DE&I, it's hard to put numbers onto it. It's
how it has an impact on the bottom line.
A lot of times people don't want to support you in DE&I initiatives unless you can say,
here's the ROI of
the business.
That's right. That's right.
This is how it helps the business. So even though the Charlie Sifford thing was groundbreaking, it was historic. It certainly was well deserved and was something personally. For me, it's my biggest accomplishment because this is someone that I read about and learned about. Ended up meeting him, becoming friends, establishing a friendship, and then as a golfer to be responsible for getting him the Presidential Medal of Freedom from the first Black president.
Monumental.
But I was struggling to survive in my job at the same time because it wasn't really regarded as something of huge significance in the way that when you say, analytics, looking at the numbers and things of that nature, right? You take a guy like, and I'm going to say this because this is still playing out and we just talked about Earl, right? How do you impact the culture of golf? Taking the people that play it, put them in leadership, allow them to be in leadership positions, support and promote them, and watch the influence that they have on others. Now, in golf, the PGA of America is about the PGA professionals, the teaching pros, club professionals, not about the tour players. There are 28,000 teaching pros or PGA professionals, of which Earl is one.
Mm-hmm.
Wyatt Worthington is one. There are only about 150 Black PGA professionals out of the 28,000.
And you're not saying 2,800. I just want this to be very clear.
28,000.
150 out of 28,000 in 2023-24 going on.
So in looking at those numbers to say, how can we impact those numbers? Because there's not going to be a drastic and wild increase in the number of people that become PGA professionals in a short period of time, right? It's not going to go from 150 people and not even in 1 year to 5 years to even go to 10,000. Very high.
Correct.
Right. But looking at those numbers, how can we impact those numbers in the way that people play it and how it impacts the business? See, it's hard to justify why you need more Black PGA professionals. No, I'm just saying in terms of the business. No, in my opinion, yes, you get more people.
Gotcha.
It puts more Black people into the economy. More money is made, right? You have a better understanding of what PGA professionals do. So in my role, it was imperative that I get behind people like Earl and Wyatt and be able to promote them because there were only a few of them, and of those that were either dynamic or active or had a huge opportunity to impact the culture of golf, right? And to see what Earl and Elijah Wan are doing right now, this is not something that could have been planned or would have been even tangible to say, I'm going to have this influence on these people and it's going to result in this.
In this level, right?
Right? You don't know that it's going to result in a level, but what you do is you create opportunities. And this is what go back to my Urban League experience. When you create opportunities for people and put them in the system where they are thriving and forming an economic base for themselves and others and being able to employ others in an industry, that's impacting an entire industry and a culture of golf. And once you impact culture, more people become engaged and, and things grow. That's how the game is going to grow, right? So using that, looking at those numbers and saying, how can I impact those numbers? You put people in opportunities to be able to thrive. You promote them in ways that have never either been seen before in this instance, because this is relatively unprecedented when it comes to space that something like this could happen. Now, I also made Steph Curry a golf ambassador while I was there for the PGA Pro, and that was largely falling on
deaf ears.
I don't want to say deaf ears, but it was like he's not a golfer. He's not a tour player. He's not like
shit. Okay,
but he's one of the most influential people in the world. And his dad taught him how to play. Dad taught him how to play basketball and golf, and he could have a huge impact on the game as a golf ambassador. That was me at the PGA of America, right? So, and you look at the impact that those people are having on this game right now. Even Steph Curry and Earl, and Eastside Golf alone, those are people that I identified when no one knew,
the significance
of them even playing golf. And what they're both doing right now and continue to do are as a result of identifying them, knowing them, putting in them opportunities to influence others.
And so crazy is that's even more of the reason why individuals like yourself need to be in these rooms and at these tables. But the wild thing is, while you were in that room and at that table, you were under a heavy scrutiny where you're worrying about even maintaining your job. When you are you're exceeding the job description. You are truly taking on leadership qualities of breaking into white space. I can't even, it's so the irony, breaking into white space. The opening scene to your life documentary is about to start. The Win story. What song is playing and why, bro?
It's funny you should say that because it would probably be something by Drake. For some reason, a lot of Drake stuff is talking to me right now. It's probably what's in the heaviest rotation of my playlist. That's very significant. That's very significant, Aster, to pick that one song for so many different reasons. I gotta you gotta give me a little bit of time to think about that. I'm really specific about my music, and that's a big.
Yeah, no. Think on it for a second. As to the next piece that we always like to end with, and we always like to ask, what are the 3 seeds that you'd want to leave with the stewards of culture moving forward? What are those 3 critical, imperative, principles or values that you think are going to be very essential for those who are going to be shaping and molding this culture, moving forward, even after we are around?
Yeah. 3 seeds?
Yep.
education and research. I mean, as in one thing, right?
Yep.
Education is the key to advancement. I don't care what you're doing. And you have to research to know, exactly what you're trying to impact, things that have been done before, and to know your history, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those things are critical. Passion, right? You have to be passionate about the things that you're doing, because things, when you're advancing the ball forward, you have to be committed beyond belief, right? There'll be frustrating moments that you want to give up, moments when you have doubters and naysayers and even people close to you who may not have the same vision that you have for yourself, right? Or for what you're trying to accomplish. And sometimes those people can be really, really, really close to you, and you got to stay committed to whatever it is that your vision is, and what the goal, the things that you're setting for yourself, right? And you have to, and there's nothing that can replace that passion, because sometimes that's the only thing that you have to go on to keep yourself committed, to have some kind of a passion and a motivation and a drive to keep on the path to whatever that is. And I'm still on that path myself. I still have to motivate myself. I still have to find passion and reevaluate things at time, and be able to to shift, and the other thing is probably a certain degree of, I'm probably going to add a fourth: patience and execution.
Yeah. Okay.
Patience and execution. Certainly, I just told you, I'm going into 25 years of the tournament and my golf journey. There are things that I set out to do over 15 years ago, probably 20 years ago, that I'm just getting the opportunity to be able to do now because of the time. Right? So in the coming years, to many people, I might look like an overnight sensation of something.
Right. Nah, not at all.
Years, right? Because, me, and people know me, and people, in our community, in our circles know me. But I'm not a household name or anything like that. But certainly some of the things that I'm working on that are coming to fruition that I, tried to accomplish many, many years ago, and the timing just was not right for me. I'm just getting the opportunity to be able to do now. And certainly, and I've had many disappointments along the way, but
comes with it.
Yeah,
comes with it.
Yeah, many disappointments along the way, but that's part of my story. But you have to stay committed and have the passion, and then you have to continue to execute. I mean, because execution is everything. Because if you can't, there are a lot of people that of course that have ideas, Aster,
but they don't execute. They don't execute.
It really doesn't matter. And at times that person has been me. I've had
Listen, but you know what? And to be frank, I mean, this is one of the reasons why I wanted you on, to share what I've known and now see even more clearly, your evolution of, what diversity and inclusion looks like. You've done it in so many different realms and in so many different ways. And I've seen it firsthand over the years. And I wanted to applaud you, but also provide a space for that to be shared. And so for that, I truly want to thank you. I want to pat you on the back and give you all the accolades of being a noticer and an observer of the things that you've done in a very huge, impactful way that for many others might get recognized in another 10 to 25 years. Who knows, right? But it's the amazing seeds that you planted. And for that, Wayne, I thank you, man.
Aster, thank you. Likewise, brother. I have a great deal of respect and admiration for you, the walls that you've been able to penetrate, right? Being a connector and always an advocate for folks and opportunities, and getting into some of those doors and being able to advocate for others in the culture. There are also very few people who have been able to accomplish some of the things that you've accomplished. We could probably sit down and name those people on one hand, some of these great companies that we admire, like the Nikes and Adidas and so forth, right? But certainly your experience and your expertise has gotten you into some great places, and you continue to be a changer and an advocate for all of us, and we're all extremely proud of you as well.
Thank you, bro. It's to God's grace.
We truly appreciate your support because it helps us fulfill our mission of promoting cultural awareness and personal development. Please click the subscribe button below to help ensure and solidify our mission.